The billionaire disguised himself as a janitor in his own resort, and only the kitchen helper gave him food every day, not knowing he was a billionaire. Get ready for a story where luxury and humility switch places. Let's dive into the surprising journey of Beckett and Morgan. If you enjoy light, fun stories full of twists, go ahead and leave your like, and at the end, comment what you thought. Enjoy the story, everyone. Beckett Shaw was one of the richest men in town, and at that exact moment, he was on his knees on the marble lobby floor, scrubbing a stain that wouldn't come out no matter what. The Cliffside Pacific Resort woke up covered in the typical fog of the Monterey coast. Through the glass walls, the ocean looked like a painting in shades of gray and blue. Seagulls circled the building as if they knew that inside there were people too rich to care about them. The first guests were already coming down for breakfast, dragging white robes and expressions of people who paid a fortune to look bored. None of them looked at the man in the navy blue uniform kneeling in the corner. Beckett scrubbed harder. The stain stayed there, motionless, almost mocking him. "Hey, you there?" He looked up. A woman in high heels and huge sunglasses pointed at the floor as if she were indicating an insect. "There's a mark on the floor near the elevator. Can you take care of that?" Beckett opened his mouth to respond, but she had already turned her back and headed toward the restaurant. The sound of her heels echoed through the lobby like small hammers of indifference. He looked at the mark he was cleaning. Then he looked at the mark near the elevator. They were the same distance from him. The woman simply chose to walk all the way around to complain instead of waiting 3 seconds. Fascinating. Beckett Shaw had built that resort from scratch. He had approved every detail of the design, from the curve of the windows to the exact temperature of the pools. He had signed checks, closed deals, and appeared on business magazine covers, smiling next to phrases like the visionary behind the hotel empire. And now he was discovering that no one could wait 3 seconds. The morning continued at that pace. Beckett cleaned, carried, organized, and was ignored with impressive consistency. In 4 hours of work, exactly 0 people asked his name. 3 people asked him to get out of the way. One person almost tripped over him and complained as if Beckett had appeared out of nowhere with the sole purpose of disrupting her walk to the sauna. Around noon, Beckett's stomach started to protest. He hadn't eaten anything since the night before. In the rush to start the experience, he had forgotten basic details like, for example, where temporary employees could have their meals. The manual he had received mentioned something about a cafeteria, but the directions were so vague that he suspected they had been written by someone who had never set foot in the building. The smell from the main kitchen reached him like aromatic torture. Garlic, butter, something grilled that probably cost a janitor's weekly salary. Beckett approached the side entrance, where employees came and went carrying trays. Maybe someone could point him to the cafeteria. Maybe there was a snack machine somewhere. Maybe he could simply exist there for 2 minutes without anyone yelling at him. Hey you! Get out of there!" A man in a white apron and the expression of someone who had swallowed a sour lemon advanced in his direction. "Maintenance staff don't hang around the kitchen area. How many times do I have to repeat that? I was just looking for..." "Doesn't matter what you were looking for. Get back to your section." "But I don't even know where the cafeteria is." The man stopped. He looked at Beckett as if he had just confessed he didn't know how to tie his own shoes. "You don't know where the cafeteria is? I'm new, started today." "And nobody showed you?" "Apparently not." The man let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all the bad decisions he had ever made in his life. "Downstairs, 3rd door on the left after the towel storage, but it closes at 2, so good luck." Beckett looked at his watch. 1:53. He ran, or at least tried to run. The uniform wasn't exactly designed for speed, and the cleaning cart he was still pushing seemed to have developed its own personality, dedicated to hitting every possible corner. When he finally reached the 3rd door on the left after the towel storage, an employee was pulling a metal gate down. "Wait, there are still 2 minutes left." The employee looked at him with the blank expression of someone who had given up caring a long time ago. "Cafeteria clock runs fast." The gate came all the way down. Beckett stood there, Sweaty, breathless, with his stomach growling loud enough to echo in the empty hallway. He owned 47 restaurants in 12 countries. He had dined with heads of state. Once, he had received a gastronomic excellence award that he didn't even know existed. And he couldn't get a sandwich in his own hotel. There was something poetic about that. Or maybe just pathetic. Beckett was still deciding which option when he heard the noise. The main kitchen was in full dinner chaos. Even though it was still early, the preparation had already begun, and the sound coming from there seemed like a combination of an out-of-tune orchestra with a construction site. Pots clanging, voices shouting, something sizzling on the stove with an intensity that suggested culinary drama in progress. Beckett approached again, this time more cautiously. He just wanted to look. He just wanted to understand how that ecosystem he theoretically supervised worked, but clearly had never really observed. More shrimp. We need more shrimp. Oven 3 is making that noise again. Who took my spatula? That was my favorite spatula. In the middle of all that, Beckett saw a figure moving with surgical precision through the chaos. A woman with her hair pulled back, stained apron, and expressions that alternated between absolute concentration and quiet amusement. She was cutting, seasoning, organizing, and still finding time to roll her eyes every time someone shouted something particularly dramatic. It was like watching a ballet in a war zone. "Hey, you again." The same man from before advanced in his direction, this time with a pan in his hand that Beckett sincerely hoped was empty. "I already told you maintenance staff don't hang around here." "I was just out now." Beckett backed away. The man kept gesturing as if he were shooing away a particularly persistent pigeon. Other kitchen staff didn't even look. It was just another janitor being kicked out. It probably happened 3 times a day. He was almost in the hallway when something slid in his direction across the steel counter. A plate. Simple, discreet, almost invisible in the middle of all that rush. Rice, grilled vegetables, and what appeared to be shredded fish with herbs. Nothing fancy, but assembled with a care that contrasted with the chaos around it. Beckett looked up. The woman from the culinary ballet had her back turned, already involved in another task, but there was something in the angle of her shoulders that suggested awareness. She knew exactly what she had done. "Eat fast before Gerald comes back," she said without turning around. He gets even more unbearable when he realizes he missed a chance to yell at someone. Beckett grabbed the plate. The warmth went through his fingers. "Thank you, Fork on the left side of the counter. Don't take the one on the right, that's Marco's, and he has emotional attachment issues with utensils." She kept working, her hands never stopping, but a minimal smile curved the corner of her mouth. Beckett ate right there, standing in the darkest corner he could find. The food was simple, but it tasted like salvation. Each forkful was a reminder that he hadn't eaten anything in almost 20 hours and that maybe, just maybe, he should have planned this adventure better. When he finished, the woman had already disappeared into the hurricane of pots and orders. He left the plate in a discreet place and went back to the hallway, still processing what had happened. In a full day of work, one person had looked at him and seen something beyond the uniform. One person had noticed he was hungry. One person had done something about it, without expecting anything in return, without asking who he was or why he deserved help. Beckett leaned against the hallway wall and stayed there for a moment. He had come to the resort to find out what wasn't working, to understand where the problems were that the reports didn't show and the managers didn't mention. He expected to find operational failures, inefficiencies, maybe some financial deviation hidden in confusing spreadsheets. He didn't expect to find kindness where there should be indifference. He didn't expect that the only person to treat him like a human being would be a kitchen helper he had never seen before. Beckett made a decision right there, in the empty hallway that smelled like cleaning product and sea air. He was going to continue, not just to investigate problems or collect information anymore. Not just as an exercise in business humility or sociological curiosity anymore. He was going to continue because he wanted to know who that woman was who pushed plates to hungry janitors in the middle of chaos. And because, for the first time in years, someone had done something for him without knowing how much he was worth. The next day would start in a few hours. Beckett went back to his post, grabbed the cleaning cart, and kept working. But now, every time he passed by the kitchen area, he slowed down his pace. Just a little. Just enough to see if she was there. The third plate appeared inside a mop bucket. Beckett stared at it for a good 10 seconds, trying to understand how someone could hide rice with grilled chicken in the only place no one would ever think to look. The container was clean, obviously, but still. The creativity was almost disturbing. 3 days had passed since the first plate pushed in secret. 3 days in which Beckett discovered that circling near the kitchen during peak hours had become his new favorite activity. It wasn't about the food. I mean, it was a little about the food, but mostly it was about the game. Morgan Reese had turned feeding the hungry janitor into a kind of Olympic sport. Behind the fire extinguisher, she murmured as she passed by him carrying a stack of pots. Blue plate. Beckett waited 30 seconds and went to the fire extinguisher. The blue plate was there, still warm, covered with a napkin that had a smiley face drawn with a pen. He laughed alone in the hallway. The fourth time, Morgan hid an entire lunch container inside the cleaning supply closet. The fifth time, she left instructions in the form of a riddle written on a napkin. The sixth time, she simply threw a stuffed bread roll in his direction while pretending to trip. "You have good aim," Beckett commented later, when he managed to find her alone near the cold storage. "I have 5 younger siblings. If you don't learn to throw food accurately, you don't survive Thanksgiving dinner." 5? My mother had interesting theories about family planning. Beckett stored that information away. It was the first personal thing she had shared, and he realized he wanted to know more. Much more. The problem was that the longer he spent pretending to be a janitor, the more obvious it became that he had no idea what he was doing. "Why are you waxing the floor with furniture polish?" Beckett froze. Morgan was standing in the doorway of the event room, arms crossed, expression divided between horror and amusement. "This isn't floor wax. That's for polishing wood. The floor is marble." "Oh, you're going to create an ice skating rink." That explains why that guest almost did an involuntary split earlier. Morgan covered her mouth with her hand, but the laugh escaped anyway. "How did you get this job? I have a very creative resume." Apparently. She walked into the room and grabbed a clean cloth from a shelf that Beckett hadn't even noticed existed. "First, you remove all of this, then you use the right product. That one there, blue, with marble, written in big letters." In my defense, the letters aren't that big. They're the size of my hand. Beckett looked at her hands. They were small, with light burned scars on the fingers. Hands of someone who really worked. He started cleaning up the mess he had created. "Do you always teach incompetent coworkers, or am I special? You're the first one who confused furniture polish with floor wax. That puts you in a unique category. I prefer to think of it as innovation. I prefer to think of it as a negligence lawsuit waiting to happen." They worked together in silence for a few minutes. That silence was comfortable. Beckett couldn't remember the last time he had been quiet near someone without feeling the need to fill the space with business talk or market analysis. 16 hours, Morgan said suddenly. "What?" "My shift yesterday. 16 hours. The sous chef got sick and nobody wanted to cover." "Is that allowed?" Morgan laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful laugh. "That's Tuesday." Beckett stopped scrubbing. He knew, theoretically, that hotels operated 24 hours. He knew there were shifts, schedules, overtime. But 16 hours straight in an industrial kitchen, in the heat, under pressure, cutting, carrying, organizing non-stop? "And you came back today?" "I pay rent in San Francisco. You know the prices?" He knew. He was partially responsible for some of them, considering the commercial properties he'd owned in the area. That information got stuck in his throat like a fishbone. 723, Morgan continued, looking at the floor that was now almost presentable. 723 what? Per hour. That's what I make. After 3 years here, Beckett felt something tighten in his chest. He spent more than that on coffee per day. On bad airport coffee sometimes because he was in too much of a hurry to choose. "Morgan." The voice cut through the air like an ice blade. Clayton Briggs appeared in the doorway like a storm cloud in human form. Impeccable suit, hair sculpted with surgical precision, expression of someone who had just stepped on something unpleasant, and was deciding who to blame. "Why are you here instead of being in the kitchen?" "My lunch break, sir, started 5 minutes ago." "And you decided to spend this precious time chatting with the cleaning staff?" The way he said "cleaning staff" made Beckett feel like he had been called something far less polite. "I was helping with a problem on the floor." "You're not paid to help with problems on the floor. You're paid to cook, if we can even call what you do cooking." Morgan didn't respond. She just stood there, chin raised, eyes fixed on some point above Clayton's shoulder. It was the posture of someone who had already learned that reacting only made things worse. Beckett felt the anger rise like mercury in a thermometer. "Yesterday's dishes were inconsistent," Clayton continued, apparently warming up for a full speech. "The risotto presentation was amateurish, and I received complaints about the fish temperature. Oven 3 has been broken for 2 weeks, sir. I've already reported it 3 times. Then you should have compensated. That's what professionals do. They compensate. They adapt. They don't make excuses." Beckett opened his mouth and closed it. Every cell in his body wanted to intervene, wanted to say that Oven 3 was broken because the maintenance request had been denied to save costs, wanted to say he knew this because he had approved the budget cut 6 months ago without asking a single question, but he couldn't say anything, not yet. Clayton finally noticed there was another person in the room. "Who are you?" "Beckett. Temporary maintenance." "Temporary?" "Yes, sir." Clayton studied him with that X-ray look that luxury hotel managers seem to develop after years of practice. "Who hired you?" "Human resources, sir." "What name? Who signed your paperwork?" Beckett hesitated for half a second. It was enough time. Clayton tilted his head like a predator that had just detected movement in his peripheral vision. "Interesting. A temporary janitor who doesn't know who hired him." "It was an online process, sir. Many people involved." "I see." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but felt like an eternity. Clayton turned to Morgan. 5 minutes, kitchen, and don't let me catch you chatting again." He left without looking back, but Beckett noticed his eyes did one last sweep of the room, cataloging, filing away, planning. Morgan let out the air she was holding. "You need to be careful with him." "I noticed." "No, you didn't. Clayton doesn't forget faces, and he just memorized yours." She hurried out, leaving Beckett alone with the finally clean marble floor and a growing feeling that he had just put a target on his own back. At the end of the hallway, Clayton Briggs stopped in front of a computer and typed a quick search in the employee system. "Beckett Shaw, temporary, maintenance." The cursor blinked 3 times. No results found. Clayton Briggs collected luxury pens, imported ties, and the fear of employees. That morning, he carried all 3 things as he crossed the resort lobby like a shark in territorial waters. Employees moved away by instinct, some pretending to have urgent tasks that didn't exist, others simply disappearing into side hallways like circus magicians. Beckett watched everything from the corner, where he was pretending to polish the same handrail for 20 minutes. Since the system searched the night before, Clayton had intensified his presence. He showed up in unexpected places, asked random questions, observed details that no one should notice. It was like working under the gaze of an eagle with trust issues. "General meeting," Clayton's voice cut through the lobby air. "All service staff, Event Hall B. Now." It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. Beckett dropped the cloth and followed the flow of nervous uniforms toward the hall. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Morgan emerge from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron with an expression that mixed resignation and irritation in equal parts. Their eyes met for half a second. Morgan rolled her eyes in a way that clearly meant, "Here we go again." Beckett had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. Event Hall B was normally reserved for weddings and corporate conferences. Today, it housed 40 employees, squeezed between stacked chairs and folding tables, all with the same expression of people who would rather be anywhere else on the planet. Clayton positioned himself in front like a general about to announce a battle. "Quarterly results," he began without preamble. "Below expectations." A murmur ran through the room. "The board is implementing adjustments, cost cuts, team restructuring." Morgan crossed her arms. Beckett noticed her fingers were squeezed tight enough to leave marks. "Some areas will be particularly affected," Clayton continued, and his eyes made a calculated pause in the direction of the kitchen. Efficiency is the word of the moment. Those who don't adapt will be relocated or let go. Excuse me, Morgan's voice cut through the silence. When you say adapt, what exactly do you mean? Clayton turned to her with the slowness of a snake preparing to strike. It means doing the work without complaining. It means not questioning superior decisions. It means, Miss Reese, not interrupting meetings with unnecessary questions. I just wanted clarity, sir, to adapt properly. The sarcasm was subtle, but present. Beckett saw the corner of a cook's mouth twitch, trying to hold back a laugh. Clayton saw it too. You? He pointed at Beckett, the temporary one. Beckett felt 40 pairs of eyes turn in his direction. Sir? The East Terrace needs immediate cleaning. A guest complained about marks on the glass. The East Terrace is under renovation, sir, surrounded by barriers. And now it's open for inspection. Go. But the gala dinner starts in an hour and the access… Are you questioning a direct order? Beckett swallowed the answer he wanted to give. That terrace was closed for safety reasons he himself had approved. That there wasn't adequate equipment for exterior cleaning. That this whole situation was an obvious display of petty power. No, sir. Excellent. I want that glass shining when I come back to check. Clayton dismissed the meeting with a wave of his hand. The employees dispersed like leaves in the wind, murmuring to each other in tones that didn't reach the manager's ears. Morgan caught up with Beckett in the hallway. The East Terrace doesn't even have an access ladder. I noticed. He's testing you. I noticed that too. Morgan looked around, making sure they were alone. There's a service ladder in storage room 3. Nobody uses it because it creaks, but it works. And take a bucket with a long handle. The glass there is slanted. How do you know all this? Because he's already made me clean that terrace. Twice. Once during a storm. Beckett stopped walking. During a storm? Said guests had complained about the raindrops interfering with the view. That makes no sense whatsoever. Welcome to Cliffside Pacific Resort. She patted him on the shoulder and disappeared toward the kitchen. Beckett found the ladder in storage room 3. It creaked exactly as Morgan had warned, producing a sound that resembled a pirate ship in a cheap adventure movie. The bucket with the long handle was hidden behind a pile of broken chairs that clearly no one had touched in years. The East Terrace was worse than he imagined. Slanted at an angle that defied basic physics, the panoramic glass offered a spectacular view of the ocean. Beckett positioned himself on the flat spot and started cleaning, moving the mop with the delicacy of a surgeon operating on a main vein. You look like a flamingo trying to clean glass. Beckett almost dropped the bucket. Morgan was standing at the service door, holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. What are you doing here? Brought your dinner. Figured you'd miss cafeteria hours. Again. How did you know where I was? Everyone knows where you are. The noise from that ladder can be heard from the parking lot. Then I realized you hadn't finished the job yet. She approached carefully, balancing on the ledge as if she did this every day. Chicken with vegetables, left over from the gala dinner preparation. You're going to get in trouble if Clayton finds out you left the kitchen. Clayton is too busy checking if the crystal glasses are aligned at exactly 45-degree angles. I have about 10 minutes. Beckett accepted the plate. His fingers brushed hers for an instant. Why do you do this? Do what? Help me. Risk getting in trouble. Bring food to a guy you've known for less than a week. Morgan was silent for a moment, looking at the ocean. Because someone did this for me when I started here. A cook named Miss Ruth. She's retired now, but she used to say that we only survive places like this if we take care of each other. And do you take care of everyone? Only those who seem to need it. And I seem to need it? Morgan looked at him, then at the makeshift bucket, then at the ladder that was still creaking in the wind. You're cleaning a slanted glass during a gala dinner because a man in a tie told you to. Yes, you seem to need it. Beckett laughed. A real laugh, the kind that escapes without permission. Clayton mentioned relocation today, he said after a moment. Does that affect you? Morgan's expression changed. Just a little, but enough. It affects everyone who isn't part of his favorites club. And you're not part of it. I ask too many questions. I question things. I suggest improvements. None of those qualities are appreciated by managers like Clayton. so you could be transferred. Or fired. He made that very clear after the meeting, spoke directly to me when the others left. Beckett felt that familiar anger rise again. What exactly did he say? Morgan imitated Clayton's pompous voice with disturbing accuracy. Miss Reese, your attitude needs significant adjustments. The resort has no room for employees who don't understand hierarchy. Consider this your final warning. Final warning for asking a question in a meeting? Final warning for existing in a way he doesn't control. The ocean wind blew between them, carrying the distant sound of music from the gala hall. I need to go back, Morgan said, and you need to finish that glass before he shows up. She turned to leave but stopped at the door. Beckett, yes? Thanks for asking. Most people just don't ask. She disappeared down the creaking ladder. Beckett stood there, holding the plate of chicken that was already getting cold, looking at the glass that reflected a spectacular sunset that no guest would see that night. For the first time since he started this experience, he didn't think about reports or profits or business strategies. He thought only about how to protect a person who didn't know he had the power to do that. Downstairs, Clayton Briggs was finishing checking the crystal glasses when his phone vibrated. A message from the Human Resources Department. About the employee you mentioned. There's no record of formal hiring. Incomplete documentation. Awaiting instructions. Clayton smiled for the first time that day. The service area clock read 11:47 at night when Morgan let out the biggest laugh Beckett had ever heard. They were sitting on the loading dock, that forgotten space between the kitchen and the parking lot, where delivery trucks unloaded supplies at dawn. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't comfortable, but it was the only place in the resort where Clayton Briggs never appeared. Wait. Morgan wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. You're telling me you've never fried an egg in your life? I said I tried to fry an egg. Once. The result was different from expected. Different how? Let's just say the fire alarm in my apartment still has trauma. Morgan doubled over laughing, the sound echoing through the empty space. A week had passed since the terrace scene. A week of stolen meetings at the end of shifts, whispered conversations between tasks, jokes exchanged through quick glances when Clayton passed by. The loading dock had become their territory, an improvised refuge where the resort world didn't reach. Tell me another one, Beckett asked. One of the absurd stories. Morgan thought for a moment, her eyes shining with that energy that appeared when she was about to tell something good. Last year, a guest asked the kitchen to prepare a birthday cake for his dog. That doesn't sound so absurd. The dog was allergic to gluten, lactose, and happiness, apparently. The cake had to be vegan, organic, and bone-shaped. And you made it? We did. We took it to the suite on a silver tray. The dog looked at the cake, looked at us, and went to sleep on the couch. He didn't even try it, didn't even smell it. The guest was so offended, he demanded we remake the cake in a different shape. Spent 3 days making us redo it. Ball shape, moon shape, the shape of something he called canine essence. What is canine essence in cake form? To this day, I don't know. We made something that looked like a misshapen cloud, and he accepted it. And the dog? Kept ignoring everything. That animal was my hero. Beckett laughed, genuinely, in that way that makes your ribs hurt. Your turn, Morgan said. Tell me something about your life, something real. The question caught Beckett off guard. He had spent days building a carefully edited version of himself. A simple guy from simple origins, with a simple life. I grew up on the East Coast, he said, choosing each word carefully. Small family. Worked in several different places. What kind of places? Offices, mostly. Administrative things. You don't seem like an office guy. What do you mean? Morgan tilted her head, studying him. You observe too much. Office people look at spreadsheets. You look at people. Beckett felt his heart race. She was too perceptive. Maybe I'm just curious. Maybe. Or maybe you're hiding something. The air between them became charged for a second, 2 seconds, 3. Morgan smiled. Relax. Everyone here is hiding something. Marco from the kitchen has a cooking channel on the internet that he swears nobody knows about. Linda from the front desk writes novels in her spare time. I myself have a notebook full of recipes I want to test someday when I have my own kitchen. You want to have your own restaurant? The question came out before Beckett could stop himself. Morgan shrugged, but there was something vulnerable in the gesture. Old dream. It'll probably keep being a dream, but it's good to have something to imagine when Clayton is yelling about the sauce temperature. Why a dream? Why not a plan? Because plans need money, time, and opportunity. I have 16-hour workdays and rent that takes up 80% of my salary. Beckett swallowed the answer he wanted to give. That he could change that. That it would only take a phone call, a signature, a decision. That would destroy everything. Hey, Morgan changed the subject with the agility of someone who had practiced for years. You need to learn to defend yourself against Clayton. Defend myself how? Verbally. You stand there like a statue when he starts yelling. That only makes him more excited. And what should I do? Morgan stood up, assuming a pompous posture that imitated Clayton with frightening accuracy. Mr. Janitor, she deepened her voice. Why isn't this hallway shining? Beckett joined the game. Because the wax is still drying, sir. No, Morgan broke character. That way you're justifying yourself. Clayton doesn't want justifications. He wants submission or resistance. Choose one. And doesn't resistance make things worse? It gets worse for those who don't know how to do it. Look, the technique is like this. She went back to Clayton's pose. Mr. Janitor, why isn't this hallway shining? Beckett cleared his throat and tried again. The hallway will be shining in 15 minutes, sir. Would you like me to prioritize another area in the meantime? Morgan's eyes widened. That, you answered without justifying yourself and threw the decision back at him. Clayton hates having to decide small things. He'll leave just to avoid having to answer. You've developed a whole science about this. 3 years of battlefield teach you a lot. They laughed together, the sound mixing with the distant noise of the waves. For a moment, Morgan was silent, looking at Beckett in a different way. Softer. The air between them changed again, but this time there was no tension. There was something else. Something that made Beckett's stomach turn in a way he hadn't felt in years. She opened her mouth to say something. Her radio exploded in static. Morgan, kitchen. Now, the voice was Gerald's, the supervisor who had kicked Beckett out on the first day. Morgan closed her eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and went back to professional mode. Duty calls? What happened? I don't know, but from the tone, it's not good. They ran back to the main building. The kitchen was in chaos when they arrived, but a different chaos from the usual. People were standing still, not working. And in the center of everything, Clayton Briggs held a charred pan as if it were evidence in a trial. Who is responsible for this station? His voice cut through the air. Silence. I asked who is responsible. I was covering that station. Morgan stepped forward. But I left an hour ago at the end of my shift. So you left the stove on when you left? No, sir. I turned everything off. I checked twice. And yet the pan burned. By itself, magically. Someone must have turned it on after I left. Clayton smiled. That cold smile that Beckett was starting to recognize. Interesting. So you're accusing your coworkers? I'm not accusing anyone. I'm saying I turned off the stove. Your word against physical evidence, Clayton raised the pan. And physical evidence says you were negligent. Beckett watched everything from the corner of the kitchen. He saw the eyes of one of the cooks look away. He saw the guilt cross that face for a second before disappearing. Someone had used that station after Morgan. Someone had made the mistake, and that someone was letting her take the blame. He almost opened his mouth, almost stepped forward, almost said there were security cameras in that area that would prove exactly who had done what and when. But that would raise questions. How would a temporary janitor know about the camera system? Why would he care so much? Beckett stayed silent and watched Clayton file a second formal warning against Morgan. When it was all over, when the kitchen emptied and the lights dimmed, Beckett stood in the empty hallway. Morgan passed by him without stopping, her eyes red but dry. Hey, he called out. She didn't look back. Not tonight, Beckett. Please. The women's locker room door closed with a soft click. Beckett leaned against the wall and stayed there, in the dark, listening to the sound of his own silence. He could have prevented that, could have defended her, could have exposed the truth, and he did nothing. The weight of that choice was different from any business decision he had ever made. There were no numbers to justify it, no spreadsheets to analyze, No consultants to blame. There was only him, his lie, and a woman who deserved better than that. That night, Beckett didn't sleep. And somewhere in the resort, a cook named Marcus was deleting a text message that said, "Thanks for not giving me up. I owe you one." The recipient was Clayton Briggs. Beckett Shaw made the call at 3 a.m, locked in the men's locker room bathroom. "I need you to access the resort's human resources system," he whispered into the phone. Now, on the other end of the line, his executive assistant, Diana, took exactly 2 seconds to fully wake up. "Mr. Shaw, it's 3 a.m. I know what time it is. You said you didn't want any contact during this experience. I changed my mind. I need you to find a warning filed yesterday against an employee named Morgan Reese, and I need that warning to disappear." Silence on the line. "Disappear how, sir?" Like it never existed. System error. Administrative failure. Anything. That's irregular. "Diana, in 12 years have you ever seen me ask for something irregular?" "No, sir." "Then do it." He hung up before she could ask more questions. The next morning, Morgan arrived at work, expecting the worst. The second warning meant a meeting with human resources, possible suspension, maybe termination. She had spent the whole night rehearsing arguments, preparing defenses, trying to find some way to prove she hadn't left the stove on. But when she opened her locker in the changing room, she found only her usual clean uniform. No summons, no official envelope, nothing. Strange. She checked the employee system on the kitchen tablet. Her record showed only one warning, the first one from weeks ago. The second one had disappeared. Even stranger. "Hey, Morgan!" Beckett appeared in the kitchen doorway, mop in hand, with that expression of someone trying very hard to look casual. "Everything okay?" "Everything's great, actually. Strangely great." "That's good, isn't it?" "It is. I just don't know why." Beckett shrugged with a bit more enthusiasm than necessary. "Sometimes things just work out." Morgan narrowed her eyes. "You're acting strange." "I'm always strange. You said yourself I look like a flamingo trying not to fall." That was in a specific context. Flamingos are strange in any context. She kept looking at him in that way that made Beckett feel like an open book being read by someone who knew all the languages. "What did you do?" "Me? Nothing. I cleaned the lobby, twice. Almost knocked over a statue, but technically it's still standing, so it doesn't count." "Beckett." "Morgan." "The warning disappeared." "What warning?" "You know which warning." Beckett maintained the most innocent expression he could manage, which probably wasn't very convincing considering he had never needed to fake innocence before in his life. "Maybe it was a system error?" "Clayton's system doesn't make errors. He checks everything 3 times. "Maybe he had a bad day. People have bad days. Even evil managers have bad days." Morgan crossed her arms. "You're hiding something." "I'm hiding several things. Everyone hides things. You said yourself that Marco has a secret cooking channel." "This is different." "Why?" "Because Marco's channel doesn't make warnings disappear out of nowhere." A cook passed by them carrying a stack of pots and shot a curious look in the direction of the discussion. Morgan lowered her voice. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but if you did something to help me—" "If I had done something," Beckett interrupted, "would you rather I had left the warning there?" The question caught Morgan off guard. "No, that's not it." "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is I don't like owing favors I don't understand." "You don't owe me anything." "That's exactly what people say when you owe something," Beckett sighed. "Morgan, I swear I didn't do anything illegal, immoral, or that's going to get you in trouble. I just know some people. Sometimes things happen." "You know people?" "Yes. A temporary janitor knows people capable of erasing records from a luxury resort's human resources system." When she put it that way, it really did sound absurd. "I have an interesting life," was the only answer he could come up with. Morgan was silent for a long moment. Beckett could practically see the gears turning in her head, connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? For now. But this conversation isn't over." She went back to her station, leaving Beckett with the feeling that he had just survived a professional interrogation. The rest of the day passed in a strange tension. Morgan was quieter than normal, watching Beckett sideways whenever he passed by the kitchen area. He, in turn, was hyper-aware of every movement he made, every word he said. At the end of the shift, they met at the loading dock as usual. I'm not going to ask anymore. Morgan said without preamble, about the warning. No? No. But I need you to know something. She sat down next to him, closer than normal. I don't need someone to save me. Never have. I put up with Clayton. I put up with this job. I put up with all of this because I chose to put up with it. Understand? I understand. Good. Because if you're trying to be some kind of masked janitor hero, you can stop. I survived 28 years without a hero. I can survive 28 more. Beckett felt something tighten in his chest. What if I'm not trying to save you? Then what are you trying to do? The question hung in the air between them. Maybe I just want to be here, he said finally. With you. In this horrible place, with this terrible boss, doing this job I clearly don't know how to do. Morgan laughed, but it was a different laugh, softer. You really don't know how to do this job. I know. It's impressive, actually. Years of education, and I can't tell the difference between furniture polish and floor wax. Maybe your education focused on the wrong things. Maybe. They sat in silence, looking at the empty parking lot. I trust you, Morgan said suddenly. I don't know why. You showed up out of nowhere, don't know how to do anything, have this strange energy of someone pretending to be something they're not. But I trust you. Beckett swallowed hard. Morgan, don't ruin this with some dramatic revelation, okay? Just accept it. He accepted it, because there was no other option, because the truth would destroy everything. Meanwhile, in the administrative office on the 3rd floor, Clayton Briggs was working overtime. The computer screen glowed on his face as he searched through records, histories, any information he could find about the mysterious janitor who had appeared out of nowhere. Beckett Shaw's file was suspiciously empty. No previous employment history, no verifiable references, nothing but a name and a social security number. Clayton typed the number into a different database. One he shouldn't have access to, but that a distant cousin in the immigration department had kindly shared. The results appeared, and Clayton Briggs leaned forward, his eyes slowly widening. Well, he murmured to the empty screen. This explains a lot. On the screen, a corporate photo showed a man in a suit at a gala event, smiling next to senators and celebrities, the same face as the janitor cleaning his hallways. Morgan was teaching Beckett how to cut onions without crying, and he was failing miserably. You're holding the knife like it's a sword, she said, trying not to laugh. It's a vegetable, not a dragon. In my defense, this vegetable is chemically attacking me. Tears were streaming down Beckett's face in amounts that seemed humanly impossible. He could barely see the cutting board, let alone the onion he was massacring into irregular pieces. Breathe through your mouth, Morgan instructed, and stop blinking so much. How do I stop blinking? Blinking is involuntary. Clearly it's not involuntary enough because you're doing it every half second. It was late at night, the kitchen was empty, and they had managed to steal an hour from the real world. Morgan had decided that if Beckett was going to keep showing up hungry, he should at least learn basic culinary survival. So far, the basics were winning. Done. Beckett stepped back from the board, wiping his face with the sleeve of his uniform. I cut it. Morgan looked at the scattered onion pieces. This looks like a crime. Culinary crime? Crime against nature. That onion had a family. You're cruel. I'm honest. There's a difference. She took the knife from his hands and, in a matter of seconds, turned what was left of the onion into perfect, uniform cubes. How do you do that so fast? Practice, and years without a social life. Beckett laughed, but there was something in the answer that made him pay attention. Without a social life, why? Morgan shrugged, her eyes focused on the board. Work. 16-hour shifts don't leave much time for romantic dinners or birthday parties. My last real friendship was with a plant that because I forgot to water it. You killed a plant through neglect? It was a cactus, supposedly indestructible. I proved the scientists wrong. That's almost impressive. Thanks. I have hidden talents. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Morgan preparing ingredients for a recipe she wanted to test, Beckett watching her every movement with an attention he could no longer disguise. 2 weeks had passed since the warning that disappeared. 2 weeks of stolen meetings, conversations on the loading dock, jokes whispered through the hallways. At some point, without Beckett noticing exactly when, this had stopped being about investigating the resort. Now it was about her. "Hey," Morgan broke the silence. "You're looking at me in a strange way." "Strange how?" "Strange like I'm an equation you're trying to solve." "Maybe you are. I'm not that complicated. I disagree." Morgan stopped cutting and looked at him. There was something different in the air between them, a tension that wasn't uncomfortable, just new. "What do you want to know?" she asked. "You can ask, I don't bite." Beckett thought for a moment. "Why are you still here?" "In the kitchen?" "At this resort, at this job. You clearly have talent for more." Morgan let out a sigh that seemed to carry years of weight. Because leaving means starting over, and starting over means admitting the last 3 years were a mistake. I'm not good at admitting mistakes. Staying is also a choice. I know, but it's a choice I control. If I get fired, it's someone else's decision. If I stay, it's mine. Does that make sense to you? It makes sense to my stubbornness. My therapy would probably disagree. Beckett laughed. You go to therapy? No, I don't have the time or money, but if I did, she would definitely disagree. You're a complicated person, Morgan Reese. Thanks, that's the second compliment I've gotten today. What was the first? Clayton said my sauce was acceptable. By his standards, that's practically a declaration of love. They laughed together, and Beckett felt that tightness in his chest again, that feeling that something important was happening, something he couldn't control, and it terrified him. Can I tell you something? He said before he could stop himself. You can. I'm not who you think I am. Morgan tilted her head. And who do you think you are? A temporary janitor with no past and no interesting future. And who are you really? Beckett opened his mouth. The kitchen door burst open. Clayton Briggs entered as if he owned the place, which, technically, he thought he did. Working late, Miss Reese? Morgan didn't flinch. Testing a new recipe, sir? With resort ingredients? Leftovers that would go in the trash. Interesting definition of leftovers. Clayton circled the counter like an inspector looking for flaws. His eyes passed over Beckett with a calculated slowness. And you, Mr. Janitor, what are you doing in my kitchen at this hour? Learning to cut onions, sir. Cut onions? Yes, sir. It's harder than it looks. Clayton moved closer. Too close. You know, I've noticed you around here a lot. For a temporary employee, you seem very integrated. I make friends easily. Do you? How curious. The air in the kitchen became heavy. Morgan looked from one to the other, clearly noticing that something was happening beyond the words. Do you need something, sir? She interrupted. Clayton smiled. That smile that looked like a trap. No, just making my nightly rounds, making sure the resort's resources are being well used. He walked to the door, but stopped before leaving. Mr. Shaw. Beckett froze. Excuse me? Shaw, that's your last name, isn't it? Yes, sir. Interesting. It's quite a common name. But you know what's funny? I searched that name in some places and the results were intriguing. Beckett's heart was beating so hard he was sure Clayton could hear it. Intriguing how, sir? Clayton shrugged with a rehearsed casualness. Oh, nothing specific. I just found it curious that someone with your resume would choose to clean floors. He left without waiting for an answer. The silence that remained was deafening. What was that? Morgan asked. I don't know. He knows something. I noticed. Beckett, what did he mean by your resume? The question hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. Beckett looked at Morgan, at those eyes that had started to trust him, at that person who deserved the truth more than anyone else. Morgan, I need to tell you something. Then tell me. His phone vibrated, a message from Diana. Clayton Briggs accessed confidential files. He knows who you are. Recommend immediate extraction. Beckett looked at the screen, then looked at Morgan, and realized that no matter what he chose to do now, someone was going to get hurt. Morgan, he began. But before he could continue, the resort speaker system came to life. Attention all employees. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Attendance mandatory. Subject, important changes in administration. Morgan looked at Beckett. Why do I have the feeling this has to do with you? He couldn't answer, because she was right. The 8 o'clock meeting never happened. Clayton canceled at the last minute, claiming schedule conflicts, but Beckett knew the truth. The manager was playing chess, and the next move wouldn't be in public. It would be surgical, personal, and directed at a specific target. Morgan Reese didn't even notice she was in the crosshairs. Or maybe she did, but chose to ignore it. "Double shift," she said when Beckett found her in the locker room at 6 in the morning. "Clayton decided I need to cover breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's 18 hours. 17 if I don't take a break. Morgan, that's against California state labor laws." She stopped tying her apron and looked at him. "How do you know about California labor laws?" Beckett swallowed hard. "I read, sometimes, random things. Janitors who read about labor legislation in their spare time. It's a hobby. It's a strange hobby. I'm a strange person. You've already established that." Morgan almost smiled, but exhaustion erased the gesture before it fully formed. The following days were an exercise in endurance. Clayton seemed to have developed a special talent for appearing whenever Morgan made the slightest slip. A drop of sauce on the counter, a spoon out of place, a dish that took 3 seconds longer than acceptable. Each error was documented, recorded, filed away. "You're building a case," Beckett said to himself as he watched Clayton note something on a tablet after criticizing Morgan for the 5th time that day. It was a tactic he knew well. Companies did this all the time when they wanted to fire someone without seeming unfair. They accumulated small infractions, created a history, then used everything as legal justification. He had approved dismissals like that. He had never stopped to think about what it was like to be on the other side. "Hey!" Morgan appeared next to him in the hallway, carrying a stack of pots that seemed to weigh more than she did. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The look of someone planning something complicated." "I'm not planning anything." "Liar." She kept walking before he could respond. On Thursday, things got worse. Clayton implemented what he called an efficiency protocol, which basically meant Morgan had to do the work of 3 people with the resources of half. "The vegetable cutter broke," she reported during the team meeting. "Use a knife," Clayton responded, without looking at her. "Cutting vegetables for 200 portions with a manual knife will triple the prep time." "Then work faster." "Sir, I'm saying that physically." "Miss Reese, I heard your complaint. My answer is, adapt. That's what professionals do." Morgan clenched her fists at her sides, but said nothing. Beckett saw her shoulders drop almost imperceptibly. The spark he had learned to recognize, that stubborn energy that appeared even on the worst days, was getting dimmer. During lunch break, he found her sitting alone on the loading dock, staring at nothing. "Brought water," he offered a bottle. "Thanks." Silence. "You can report him, you know," Beckett said after a moment. "There's a human resources department. There's legislation. There's reality," Morgan interrupted. "And in reality, employees like me don't win against managers like him. We complain, we get labeled as troublemakers, we get fired for cultural incompatibility, and we leave without a reference and without severance. That's not right. Right and real are different things." Beckett felt the anger rise again. That familiar anger that appeared every time he saw the system working exactly as it was designed to work, crushing those at the bottom to protect those at the top. "What if you had help?" he asked. "Real help. From someone with the power to change things." Morgan looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Are you talking about yourself?" "I'm speaking. Hypothetically." "Hypothetically," she repeated. "A temporary janitor with the power to change things." Forget it, it was a silly question. It really was. But there was something in her look that said she hadn't forgotten anything. On Friday, the confrontation happened. Morgan was in the middle of dinner prep when Clayton entered the kitchen with a tablet in his hand and that predatory smile that Beckett had learned to fear. "Miss Reese," a moment. The entire kitchen fell silent. Pots stopped clanging. Conversations died. Everyone knew what was coming. "I reviewed your performance history from the last few weeks," Clayton began, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "And the results are concerning." "Sir, I'm in the middle of..." "You're in the middle of your shift, which means you're on my time. And on my time, you're going to listen." Morgan put down the knife. Her eyes met Beckett's for a second. He was standing in the doorway, unable to move. Delays, waste of ingredients, complaints from supervisors. A formal warning that mysteriously disappeared, but that I recreated based on testimonies. "That's not..." "Don't interrupt me. I'm documenting a pattern of inappropriate behavior. A pattern that, if it continues, will result in immediate termination." Morgan's face was red, but her voice came out steady. Mr. Briggs, with all due respect, this pattern you're describing is fabricated. I did everything you asked, worked all the extra shifts, covered all the coworkers who didn't show up. If that's inappropriate, then the problem isn't me. The silence that followed was absolute. Clayton leaned forward, voice low but penetrating. Are you accusing me of something, Miss Reese? I'm stating facts, Mr. Briggs. Facts, he repeated the word as if it were poison. Well, here's a fact for you. By the end of this week, I'm going to have a decision about your future at this resort, and based on your current performance, and especially your attitude, I suggest you start updating your resume. He turned his back and left. The kitchen remained silent for a few more seconds before normal sounds returned. But there was something different in the air now, a tension that didn't exist before. Morgan went back to her station without looking at anyone. Beckett followed her to the service hallway as soon as he could get away. Morgan? No. I just want to. I said no. She stopped, took a deep breath, and when she turned around, there were tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. You want to help? Great, then tell me the truth. Who are you really? Why are you here? And why does Clayton seem to know you from somewhere? Beckett stayed silent. That's what I thought, Morgan said. Everyone has secrets, but some secrets hurt more than others. She went back to the kitchen. Beckett stood in the hallway, the weight of the lie heavier than ever. That night, Clayton Briggs sent an email to the resort's legal department. Subject: termination process. Morgan Reese. Body of email: please prepare documentation for dismissal with cause. Deadline: Monday. The termination email never reached the legal department. Diana intercepted it at 2 a.m, redirected it to a folder only Beckett had access to, and responded with an automatic message saying the system was under temporary maintenance. Clayton Briggs spent all Saturday trying to resend the documentation, without success. Beckett knew it was a temporary solution, a bandage on a wound that needed surgery. But it was the most he could do without revealing everything. On Monday, strange things started happening at the resort. The vegetable cutter that had been broken for weeks was replaced with a brand new model. The coffee machine in the employee area, which spit out a liquid that looked more like oil than caffeine, got an imported replacement. The worn-out uniforms of the kitchen staff were exchanged for new versions, well-fitted, with fabric that didn't itch. Is someone making anonymous donations to the resort? Gerald, the kitchen supervisor, asked, looking at the vegetable cutter as if it were a divine apparition. Maybe management finally woke up, another cook suggested. Management doesn't wake up even with a fire alarm. Morgan observed everything in silence. Her eyes narrowed in that way Beckett had learned to recognize as detective mode activated. You're quiet, he commented when he managed to get close. I'm thinking. About coincidences. What kind of coincidences? Morgan turned to him. The kind where I'm about to get fired, and suddenly all the equipment I've complained about for the last 6 months shows up brand new. The kind where my working conditions magically improve at the exact moment Clayton is trying to destroy me. Beckett kept his expression neutral. Maybe the universe is compensating. The universe doesn't buy industrial vegetable cutters. How do you know? Maybe that's exactly what the universe does in its spare time. Morgan didn't laugh. Beckett, what did you do? I didn't do anything. You're lying. Would I lie to you? You lie about everything. I still don't know where you came from, what you did before, or why you showed up out of nowhere knowing about labor laws and acting like you have more power than any janitor should have. The accusation hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. Morgan, don't Morgan me. I want the truth. The truth is complicated. Then uncomplicate it. I don't know how to do that without ruining everything. Ruin what? Her eyes met his, and Beckett saw something there that took his breath away. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment. And for some reason, disappointment hurt much more. I need time, he said. Time for what? To figure out how to tell the truth without losing you. Morgan was silent for a long moment. You think you already have me? The question was simple, but carried layers that Beckett wasn't prepared to face. I think, he said slowly, that what's happening between us is real, more real than anything I've ever felt. That doesn't answer my question. No, it doesn't. Because I don't know the answer. I just know that when you're around, I forget to pretend to be someone I'm not. That's ironic, considering you're clearly pretending to be someone you're not. Beckett let out a humorless laugh. I know, it's a paradox. I'm terrible at this. Terrible at paradoxes? Terrible at feelings. Morgan crossed her arms. You're using feelings to avoid the conversation about truth. I'm not. Yes, you are. Okay, maybe I am, but it's because the truth is going to change everything. Change how? You're going to hate me. I'm not going to hate you. You say that now. Beckett, I worked for Clayton Briggs for 3 years. You don't know my capacity to not hate people who deserve it. Despite the tension, Beckett smiled. Was that a compliment? It was an observation. There's a difference. You always have an answer for everything. You always have a question to deflect from everything. They stood looking at each other, the air charged with unspoken things. I'm going to tell you, Beckett said finally. Everything, but not here. Not like this. Then where? When? Tonight, at the loading dock, after your shift. Morgan studied his face for a long moment. What if I don't like what you say? Then at least you'll know the truth, and I'll have been honest at least once. That's a very low standard of honesty. I know. I'm working on it. The rest of the day passed in a fog of anticipated tension. Beckett made more mistakes than normal, which was impressive considering his track record. He spilled a bucket of dirty water in the main hallway. He confused disinfectant with furniture polish for the second time in 3 weeks. He was almost run over by a room service cart while looking at his phone checking if Diana had more news. You're more distracted than usual. Morgan commented when they passed each other in the hallway. And your usual is already pretty distracted. I'm nervous. Why? Because tonight I'm going to tell the truth to a woman I'm in love with, and I'll probably lose her in the process. Morgan stopped walking. What did you say? Beckett also stopped. Which part? The middle part. The part about telling the truth? No, the other part. The part about being nervous? Beckett. Yes. You said you're in love. The hallway was empty, but Beckett felt like the whole world was watching. I did. With me. With you. Morgan opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's very convenient. What? Confessing feelings exactly when you're about to reveal something terrible. It's a classic persuasion technique. I'm not persuading you. How will I know? You won't. That's the point. You're going to have to trust me. Trust the guy who lies about everything? Trust the guy who's trying to stop lying. Morgan shook her head, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't just distrust anymore. Tonight, she said. Loading dock. And if you don't show up or come up with another excuse, I swear that. I'll be there. Promise? I promise. She nodded once and kept walking. Beckett stood in the hallway, his heart beating so hard it seemed like it wanted to escape from his chest. At 10 o'clock at night, he was at the loading dock, waiting. At 10:15, Morgan appeared. So, she said, sitting down next to him, who are you really? Beckett took a deep breath. My name is Beckett Shaw, and I'm the owner of this resort. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Morgan started to laugh. Nice try. Now be serious. Beckett wasn't laughing, and when Morgan looked at his face, the laughter died. Morgan didn't blink for almost 30 seconds. Beckett counted. It was a way to occupy his mind while waiting for her to say something, anything, even if it was just to send him away from the loading dock that had become his favorite place in the whole world. You're telling me, she finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled, that I spent 3 weeks hiding food in mop buckets to feed a billionaire. Technically, yes. A billionaire who owns the place where I work. Also technically correct. A billionaire I taught to tell the difference between furniture polish and floor wax. That was a very useful lesson. Morgan got up from the crate where she was sitting. I'm leaving. Morgan, wait, no, I need to process this, away from you. She walked to the door but stopped before leaving. How long were you going to let this continue? I don't know. You don't know. I didn't have a plan. I came here to understand what was wrong with the resort, and then you showed up. And everything got complicated. Complicated. Morgan repeated the word as if it were acid in her mouth. You know what's complicated? Working 16 hours a day for $7.23 an hour. That's complicated. Being harassed by a manager who wants to destroy me. That's complicated. Finding out that the only person who seemed to understand me in this place is the owner pretending to be poor? That's not complicated. That's cruelty. I never wanted to. I don't care what you wanted. I care about what you did. She left without looking back. Beckett was alone on the loading dock, the sound of distant waves his only company. The next 3 days were the longest of his life. Morgan no longer appeared in the places where they used to meet. She didn't look at him when they passed in the hallways. She didn't respond to attempts at conversation, which consisted of Beckett saying, "Morgan," and her continuing to walk as if he didn't exist. "You did something," Gerald commented on Tuesday, looking at Beckett with suspicion. "Morgan is different." Different how? Sad different and angry different at the same time. It's scary. "I didn't do anything." "Liar. Everyone saw you two. We thought it was romance. Apparently it was drama. It's complicated. It always is." On Wednesday, Beckett tried a different approach. He left a note in Morgan's locker. "I'm sorry, let me explain, please." The note came back torn into 4 pieces, shoved under the men's locker room door. On Thursday, he tried again. "I was wrong. You have every right to be angry, but what I feel for you is real." This time the note came back whole, but with a single word written on the back. No. Beckett was beginning to understand that Morgan Reese wasn't the type who forgave easily. What he didn't know was that Clayton Briggs was working on a much more elaborate plan than torn notes. "Mr. Shaw." The voice came from behind him, in the 3rd-floor hallway on Friday at 8 in the evening. Beckett turned slowly. Clayton was standing there, smiling in that way that looked like a predator preparing to strike. "I knew you'd make a mistake eventually," Clayton said, approaching. "I just didn't imagine it would be so romantic." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. The mysterious janitor who appears out of nowhere, no history, no references, but with inexplicable access to corporate resources. It took me a while to put the pieces together, I confess. You were careful." "Clayton?" "But not careful enough. You know what gave me the final clue? The new equipment. No division manager approves equipment replacement in a week. It takes months, sometimes years, but for the resort owner, it's just a phone call." Beckett said nothing. "And there's more," Clayton continued, clearly enjoying the moment. "The warning that disappeared. The termination email that never reached its destination. Small interferences that only someone with real power could make." "What do you want?" Clayton pretended to think. "Initially, I wanted to expose you, humiliate you in front of everyone. Show that the great billionaire was playing poor while real employees suffered. And now? Now I realized I can do something more interesting. Which would be? A partnership. You keep your little secret, I keep my position, and we both pretend none of this happened. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a business opportunity. It's different." Beckett felt the anger rise but controlled himself. "And if I refuse?" Clayton shrugged. "Then tomorrow at the general staff meeting, I'll tell everything. Show the proof, expose the entire farce, and let your employees decide what they think of a boss who pretended to be one of them just to, what exactly? Have fun? It wasn't fun. Doesn't matter what it was. What matters is how it's going to look." Beckett was silent for a long moment. "You're worse than I imagined." "Thank you, I try hard." "That wasn't a compliment." "I know, but I'll accept it anyway." Clayton backed away, still smiling. "You have until tomorrow at 9 in the morning to decide. General meeting, main event hall. Be there with an answer." He disappeared down the hallway. Beckett leaned against the wall, the weight of the situation falling on him like an avalanche. There was no good option. If he accepted the blackmail, Clayton would continue being the same abusive manager as always, now protected by dangerous knowledge. If he refused, the truth would come out in the worst possible way, told by the worst possible person, and Morgan would find out that he had not only lied, but had been exposed by a man she despised. Beckett grabbed his phone and dialed Diana. "I need you to do something." "Mr. Shaw, it's 11 at night." "I know, but tomorrow at 9 there's going to be a meeting, and I need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" "To tell the truth, my way." Silence on the line. "Are you sure, sir?" "No, but I'm tired of lying." He hung up and looked out the window at the dark ocean. Tomorrow everything was going to change. For better or for worse, he didn't know. But one thing was certain. Clayton Briggs wasn't going to tell Beckett Shaw's story. Beckett was going to tell it himself. The next morning, at 8:55, the main event hall was packed. Employees from all departments settled into chairs, murmuring about the reason for the last-minute meeting. Clayton Briggs was on stage, tablet in hand, a smile on his face. And at the back door, still in his janitor's uniform, Beckett Shaw took a deep breath and walked in. Clayton Briggs was savoring every second of that moment. The main event hall had a capacity for 200 people, but that morning it housed only the 60 employees of the morning shift, all squeezed into the first rows like students waiting for a scolding from the principal. The air conditioning hummed low, the curtains were closed, and Clayton occupied the center of the stage like a conductor about to conduct his favorite symphony. Beckett remained at the back door, watching. Morgan was in the third row, between Gerald and a cook he recognized, but whose name he never learned. She didn't look back, didn't notice he had entered. Her eyes were fixed on Clayton with that expression of someone who already expects the worst. "Thank you all for attending," Clayton began, voice amplified by the lapel microphone. "I know it was a last-minute summons, but I have important information to share." A murmur ran through the audience. In recent weeks, this resort has been going through unusual situations. Equipment replaced without authorization, documents disappearing from the system, interference in administrative processes that should follow protocol. Beckett saw Morgan's shoulders become tense. "Initially, I suspected technical failure," Clayton continued, clearly enjoying the attention. "But after thorough investigation, I discovered something much more interesting." He made a dramatic pause. Beckett almost rolled his eyes. Clayton had always been given to theatrics. "We have an imposter among us." The murmur turned into buzz. An employee who is not who he says he is, someone who lied about his identity, infiltrated our team, and spent weeks pretending to be something he's not. Clayton swept the audience with his eyes, purposely stopping at Morgan. "And this person developed a close relationship with one of our kitchen employees." Morgan turned red. Not from shame, from anger. "Mr. Briggs," she stood up, voice firm. "If you have something to say about me, say it directly." "Miss Reese, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your friend." "My friend?" "The janitor, Beckett Shaw." The name echoed through the hall. "Who, as I discovered, is no janitor at all. In fact, he is. I am the owner of this resort." Beckett's voice cut through the air like thunder on a clear day. He walked down the center aisle, still wearing the navy blue uniform stained with cleaning products, hands in his pockets, the calm expression of someone who had already accepted that the circus was on fire and decided to enjoy the show. Absolute silence. 60 pairs of eyes followed his every step to the stage. Clayton stood paralyzed, mouth open, tablet shaking in his hands. You can't just... Can't what, Clayton? Walk into a meeting at my own resort? Get on stage in my own event hall? Beckett stopped next to him, the height difference between the two suddenly much more evident. "You were going to expose me anyway," Beckett continued. "So I thought it was more honest for me to do it personally." This is completely irregular," Clayton stammered. "Irregular was you spending 3 weeks harassing an exemplary employee because she had the courage to ask questions in meetings." The murmur returned, this time directed at Clayton. "Irregular was you falsifying warnings, manipulating schedules, and creating such a hostile work environment that talented people prefer to stay silent rather than risk their jobs. I have documentation of everything." Clayton raised the tablet like a shield. "Reports, records, proof that your interference compromised administrative protocols." "You're right," Beckett admitted. "I interfered. I used my position to protect someone who was being wronged. And if that's irregular, then maybe the regulations need to change." He turned to the audience. "My name is Beckett Shaw. I'm the founder and owner of Cliffside Pacific Resort. 3 weeks ago, I decided to work here as a temporary employee because I wanted to understand what reports and spreadsheets don't show." Pause. "And what I discovered shames me." Beckett looked at the faces in the audience. People he had never seen before, people whose names he didn't know. People who made the resort function every day while he signed checks in air-conditioned offices. "I discovered that you work impossible hours for insufficient wages, that broken equipment goes months without replacement, that suggestions for improvement are ignored and anyone who dares to complain is punished. Silence. I discovered that I created a place where people are treated as disposable. Morgan was standing now, but didn't move. Her eyes met Beckett's for the first time since the loading dock. There was no anger there. There was something worse. There was deep and complete disappointment. Clayton Briggs is, as of this moment, suspended from his duties, Beckett continued, turning to the manager, pending formal investigation into administrative conduct. You can't do this, Clayton exploded. I have a contract. I have rights. You have a lawyer. I suggest you consult immediately. This is retaliation. This is persecution. This is consequence. There's a difference. 2 security guards that Beckett had summoned the night before appeared at the side doors. Please escort Mr. Briggs to his office so he can collect his personal belongings. Clayton looked around, seeking support, finding only averted faces and awkward silence. You're going to regret this, he murmured as he was escorted out. All of you. The door closed behind him. Beckett looked at the audience again. I know this is a lot to process. I know you have questions, and I promise that, in the coming days, I'll answer all of them. He took a deep breath. But now, I need to talk to one person in particular. His eyes found Morgan's. Morgan, please, give me 5 minutes. She didn't respond. Instead, she stood up, walked past Gerald, walked past the coworkers who were trying not to stare, and headed toward the side door. Morgan, no. The word was low, but definitive. You owe me at least a conversation. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. I don't owe you anything. Then give me a chance, please. Morgan turned around. There were tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. You want to know the worst part? It's not the lie. Lies I understand. Lies are part of the world. Then what's the worst part? The worst part is that I believed in you. I thought I had finally found someone who really saw me, who understood me, who was on the same level as me. She let out a humorless laugh. But you were never on my level. You were pretending to be, and that's worse than any lie. Morgan, what I felt, what I feel, is real. How will I know? How will I know what's real when everything you told me was a performance? Beckett had no answer. That's what I thought. Morgan opened the door. Congratulations on the dramatic speech, Mr. Shaw. It was very inspiring. I'm sure the employees will love telling this story at parties. Morgan, I'm leaving. The resort, the job, all of this, don't look for me. She left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a crash in Beckett's heart. In the hall, 60 employees remained silent, not knowing whether they should applaud, cry, or simply go back to work. Beckett stood on stage alone, looking at the door through which Morgan had disappeared. He had won the battle against Clayton, but he had lost the only thing that really mattered. Morgan's resignation letter arrived at Beckett's desk exactly 47 minutes after the meeting. He was in the office that had technically always been his, but that he had never used, surrounded by papers that Diana had brought in a hurry and reports that Clayton had left behind. The white envelope looked harmless, but Beckett knew the content was a sentence. By this document, I communicate my voluntary resignation from the position of kitchen helper at Cliffside Pacific Resort, effective immediately. No explanations, no goodbyes, just 2 cold lines and a signature he knew from napkins with smiley faces. Beckett put down the letter and looked out the panoramic window, the same ocean he saw from the loading dock, only from a completely different angle. From above, from far away, from where billionaires observe the world without ever really touching it. Mr. Shaw? Diana appeared at the door, tablet in hand. Mr. Briggs's lawyer is on the phone. He wants to negotiate the terms of the suspension. Tell him there's no negotiation. The investigation will follow protocol. He mentioned a lawsuit for defamation. He can sue. I have documentation of 3 years of ignored complaints, employees who resigned citing a hostile environment, and at least 12 reports of moral harassment that were never investigated. Diana nodded. And what about Miss Reese? What about her? She resigned. Are you going to accept it? Beckett looked at the letter on the desk. No. Put it on hold. Sir, legally she has the right to. I know what she has the right to. Put it on hold. I need to talk to her first. Diana hesitated. Mr. Shaw, with all due respect, Miss Reese made it very clear she doesn't want contact. I know. But she deserves more than a letter accepted by an automated system. What if she doesn't want to listen? Then at least I'll have tried. Finding Morgan wasn't difficult. She was at the loading dock, because apparently that place had become the gravitational center of everything that mattered in this story. Sitting on the same crate as always, looking at the same empty parking lot, only this time with a backpack beside her and an expression that said, "I was expecting you to show up, and I'm not happy about it." "You read my letter," she said without turning around. "I did." "And you came here for what? To convince me to stay?" "I came here to apologize properly." Morgan finally looked at him. "You already apologized, on stage, in front of 60 people. It was very dramatic. That was an explanation. It wasn't an apology. What's the difference?" Beckett sat on the crate next to her, keeping enough distance to respect her space, close enough so she would know he wasn't going to run away. The difference is that an explanation is about context. An apology is about taking responsibility. Then take it. "I lied to you. Consciously, repeatedly. I had dozens of opportunities to tell the truth, and I chose not to because I was afraid of losing what we were building." "And what were we building?" "I don't know what to call it. But it was the most real thing I've felt in years." Morgan let out a humorless laugh. "Real, you keep using that word. But how can something be real when it was built on top of a lie?" "The lie was about who I am professionally, not about who I am as a person. And how will I know the difference? How will I separate the Beckett who made me laugh at the end of shifts from the Beckett who signs million-dollar checks? They're the same person." "No, they're not. The Beckett I knew didn't know how to tell furniture polish from floor wax, didn't know how to cut onions, went hungry because he couldn't find the cafeteria. That's still true, but now I know it was true by choice. You chose not to know those things. You chose to seem vulnerable. You chose to let me take care of you." The accusation hit Beckett like a punch to the stomach. "You think I pretended to need help? I don't know anymore what you pretended and what was real. The hunger was real. The confusion was real. The fact that I had never worked a day in my life with my hands was painfully real. And the rest too. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment I spent wanting to tell you the truth but being too afraid." Morgan was silent for a long moment. "You know what the hardest moment was for me?" she finally asked. "What?" "When Clayton humiliated me in front of everyone because of the burned pan, and you just stood there, watching, doing nothing. I wanted to do something, but you didn't. If I had interfered, it would have raised suspicions. It would have protected me," Morgan interrupted. "Would have shown that you cared more about me than about your lie." Beckett had no answer for that. "I know," he said after a moment. "I know I was wrong. I know I made wrong choices, and I know that sorry doesn't fix any of this." "Then why are you here?" "Because I want you to know that what I felt, what I feel, wasn't strategy. It wasn't persuasion. It was real. It is real. And what do you expect me to do with that information?" "Nothing. I don't expect anything. You have every right to leave, to never talk to me again, to hate me for the rest of your life." "I don't hate you." The statement caught Beckett by surprise. No. Hating takes energy, and I'm too tired to waste energy on you." Despite everything, Beckett almost smiled. "Is that progress?" "That's exhaustion. Don't confuse them." They sat in silence, looking at the parking lot where nothing was happening. "I'm not going to accept your resignation," Beckett said. "You can't force me to stay." "I know, but I can leave the door open." "Why?" "Because you're the best employee this resort has, and because I want you to have a choice. Not obligation, not pressure, not persuasion. Choice." Morgan looked at him. "What if I choose to leave? Then I'll respect it. But you'll leave knowing you had the option to stay." "And you? Are you going to stay waiting for me like an abandoned dog?" "I'm going to keep trying to be a better person. If you're around to see it, great. If not, at least I'll know I tried." Morgan stood up, grabbing her backpack. "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know. Enough time to figure out if I can forgive you." "What if you find out you can't?" Morgan stopped at the door. "Then at least I'll have tried." She left without looking back. Beckett stayed at the loading dock, alone, looking at the place where she had been sitting. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a guarantee of anything, but it also wasn't a no. and for now that was enough. Or at least that's what he told himself as the afternoon fog began to cover the empty parking lot. 3 weeks later, an envelope appeared on Beckett's desk. It wasn't a resignation letter. It was a dinner invitation, written on a napkin, with a smiley face in the corner. The napkin said, "Loading dock, 8 o'clock. Bring your own dinner because I'm not going to feed you for free anymore." Beckett read that message at least 40 times in the following 3 hours. He analyzed every word, every comma, every line of the smiley face in the corner. He consulted Diana about possible interpretations. Diana suggested he stop freaking out and just show up at the agreed time. At 7:55, he was at the loading dock with a paper bag containing 2 sandwiches he had made himself. They were ugly, they probably weren't edible, but they were his. Morgan arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, still in her kitchen uniform. "You came," she said. "Did you doubt it? I thought you'd send an assistant in your place, or a helicopter, or something absurdly rich. I brought sandwiches." Morgan looked at the bag with suspicion. "You made sandwiches?" "I tried to make sandwiches. What's the difference?" "The difference is that one of them may or may not contain eggshell because I don't know how to peel a hard-boiled egg properly." Morgan grabbed the bag, opened it, and examined the contents with the expression of a scientist analyzing an unknown species. "Is this mayonnaise?" "It was supposed to be." "Why is it green?" "I added herbs to make it look gourmet." "What kind of herbs?" "I don't know. They were green. They were in the cabinet." Morgan closed her eyes for a moment, clearly fighting some emotion. When she opened them, she was laughing. "You're a disaster." "I know. A complete and absolute disaster." "I know that too. And you expected to win me back with sandwiches that look like they were made by a 5-year-old with motor coordination problems?" "I expected to win you back with honesty. The sandwiches are just a bonus." Morgan sat on the usual crate, still holding the bag. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks. I spent 3 weeks thinking, analyzing, trying to understand if what I felt was real or if it was all an act. "And what did you conclude?" "That you're terrible at pretending. If you really wanted to fool me, you would have been more careful. You would have invented a more convincing past. You wouldn't have frozen in fear on the East Terrace trying to clean that glass." "I didn't freeze in fear. Gerald said you froze and went into shock for 2 minutes. It was a minute and a half, and I had the situation under control. You whispered for help. It was a strategic whisper, to see if anyone had seen me." Morgan laughed again. It was Beckett's favorite sound in the world. "I also thought about Clayton," she continued, "about how you could have told me the truth when he started harassing me, could have used your power to solve everything in 5 minutes. I should have done that. Maybe. But if you had, I would never know if you valued me for who I am, or if you were just protecting an investment. You were never an investment." "I know. Now I know. It took 3 weeks, but I know." Beckett sat down next to her, closer than he should have, but Morgan didn't move away. "What changed?" he asked. "I saw the changes at the resort. In the last 21 days, Cliffside Pacific had gone through a silent but profound transformation. Salaries were revised upward. Schedules were adjusted to respect labor laws. Broken equipment was replaced. An anonymous reporting channel was created. And Clayton Briggs had been officially terminated after an investigation that revealed years of inappropriate conduct. "Those changes would have happened anyway," Beckett said. "They were necessary. But you made a point of implementing them personally. Spent weeks talking to employees, listening to complaints, taking down suggestions. How do you know that?" "Gerald told me, and Linda from the front desk, and Marco from the kitchen, and basically everyone you interviewed in the last 3 weeks. I was trying to better understand the business. You were trying to prove you changed." Beckett didn't deny it, and did it work? Morgan looked at him for a long moment. "I haven't completely forgiven you. It'll probably take time, maybe a lot of time. I can wait. But I'm willing to try, start over, see if we can build something real this time." "Real like what?" "Real like no lies, no disguises, no you pretending to be something you're not." "What if I still don't know exactly what I am? Then we'll figure it out together." Beckett felt something warm spread through his chest. It wasn't relief, it was hope. "I have a proposal," he said. "What kind of proposal?" The resort needs a new executive chef, someone with vision, talent, and the ability to lead a team. Morgan narrowed her eyes. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. The position was open based on merit, not favoritism. You would have to go through the normal selection process. What if I don't want it? Then I respect your decision and we keep eating horrible sandwiches at the loading dock. What if I do want it? Then you compete for the position like any other candidate. And if you win because you deserve it. Not because you're dating the owner. Morgan was silent for a moment. Dating? Beckett realized what he had said. You said dating. It was a generic term. Dating is not a generic term. It can be, in some contexts. In what context is dating generic? In the context where I'm an emotional disaster trying not to ruin the only good moment I've had in weeks. Morgan smiled, a real smile, the kind that lit up her whole face. You really are terrible at this. I know, but I'm trying to get better. And do you think we can make this work? A billionaire and a kitchen helper. Former kitchen helper, possibly future executive chef. That doesn't change the fact that we come from completely different worlds. Different worlds, but the same loading dock. That should count for something. Morgan looked at the empty parking lot, at the sky that was beginning to darken, at the resort lights blinking in the distance. One condition, she said. Anyone. You never lie to me again. About anything. Not to protect me, not to avoid conflict, not because you think it's best for me. Promised. And if you lie, you can make me clean the East Terrace again, during a real storm this time. Deal. She extended her hand. Beckett looked at that hand, at the fingers that still had light burned scars, at the person who had seen beyond the uniform when no one else did. He shook her hand. Partners? Morgan asked. Partners. And the rest? The rest we'll figure out along the way. Morgan grabbed one of the sandwiches from the bag and took a brave bite. She chewed for 2 seconds. Stopped. Beckett? Yes? This isn't an herb. It's not. This is a bay leaf. It's the same thing. Bay leaf is for cooking, not for eating directly. Oh, you put raw bay leaf in a sandwich. In my defense, nobody explained the difference to me. Morgan put down the sandwich and started laughing. A real laugh, without reservations, that echoed through the empty loading dock. Beckett laughed too, because it was the only thing that made sense at that moment. Come on, Morgan said when she managed to stop laughing. I'm going to teach you how to make a decent sandwich. Now? Now, the kitchen is empty. Are you sure? I have a complicated history with kitchens. I know, but everyone deserves a second chance. She stood up and extended her hand. This time it wasn't a business handshake. It was an invitation. Beckett accepted. And as they walked toward the resort, side by side, he realized that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was just being himself. And that was enough. 6 months later, Cliffside Pacific Resort was voted the best place to work in California by a business magazine. The article mentioned an innovative employee development program, benefits above the market average, and an executive chef who had revolutionized the menu with creative recipes and a philosophy of food that feeds the soul. What the article didn't mention was that every night after the kitchen closed, the resort owner showed up to learn how to cook. He still didn't know the difference between bay leaf and fresh herbs, but he was getting better, and Morgan was there to teach him. We've reached the end of Beckett and Morgan's journey. If you believe that nothing happens by chance, comment the word love in the comments. Take the opportunity to rate this story from 0 to 10 and tell me, what was your favorite part of this resort story?